Right, my top 5 Sex Pistols moments put together at extreme lassitude. So, number 5, I believe, in my exciting Sex Pistols moments, the night that Pete Townsend met Paul Cook and Steve Jones. I think Legalize, you'll know about this one. Pete was already drunk after hours of financial haggling over Who band business, and he kind of half recognised Cook and Jones in some club in London. Knew them in the Sex Pistols. He actually thought one of them was Johnny Rotten, because he was so drunk already. But when they corrected them, he got really confused and embarrassed, and he made tons of abject apologies for being a rock dinosaur and urged the Pistols to take over from the Who and save rock and roll by finishing the job they'd started and killing it off or whatever. But Cook and Jones actually were thrilled to meet him because they loved the Who, one of the band's classic rock bands they loved, and they were horrified when he said that the Who were going to break up because they were finished and washed up, and they declared their love of the Who. In fact, the Pistols did have Substitute in their live set. But that evening finished with the drunken Pete Townsend sleeping in a Soho doorway, and thus inspired the Who classic "Who Are You," which was written about this night. But yeah, they loved the Who.
It's very interesting.
Alcohol's a hell of a drug.
That's right. So it was one classic rock band they were willing to give a pass to. And funnily enough, they spent some time as well with another classic, another punk alumni, Pete. And there's Pete with Mick Jones.
Did the Sex Pistols ever comment on Led Zeppelin?
Not to my knowledge, but if they did, it probably wouldn't be favourably.
A jolly good bunch of lads. I wish the guitar solos were a bit longer.
That's right, yes. And I like the Hammond organ of John Paul Jones. Oh, here, I've got a Clash story. Totally nothing to do with this. Mick Jones of the Clash once met Mick Jones of Foreigner, who the guy founded Foreigner. And they were chatting away, and Mick Jones says to Mick Jones of the Clash says to Mick Jones of Foreigner, "I wish I had your royalties." Because Mick Jones of Foreigners made a lot more money. But, yeah, because they always got the name got confused in the press a lot, even though they're very different. So number 4, "God Save the Queen" reaches number 1 in the British charts.
Controversial to this.
Or does it, Captain? Or does it?
I say I'm so glad it did, but they still won't admit it.
Yeah. So "God Save the Queen," the single, was released on the 27th of May 1977 on Virgin Records. This was the third time round for this record because EMI had signed them, recorded it, and then dumped them within a week. A&M had signed it, pressed 20,000 copies of the single, dumped the band, and virtually scrapped all of those. It's one of the most collectible records ever in history. If you can find a copy of "God Save the Queen" on A&M Records, it's worth a fortune. But anyway, they released it on Virgin eventually. This powerful slab of noise excoriating the British monarchy, that's a good word for you, was instantly banned.
Do you have it?
I don't have an A&M "God Save the Queen." If I did, I'd have a producer.
God save the Queen.
Fascist regime. And there's so the BBC
screaming.
The BBC banned it immediately. No rare airplay, no television. And their supposedly independent local radio competitors like ITN and so on, they banned it as well. Because it was the Queen's Silver Jubilee, you see. And I mentioned Virgin because they Richard Branson, to his credit, took the Pistols on when 2 other labels had dropped them. But despite that total...
So wait a minute. BBC can play nudity, but they can't play "God Save the Queen"?
That is correct. The BBC is and always has been the British establishment, you see. So anyway, despite this almost total ban, the single sold out everywhere. And the powers that be, they decided the record couldn't be allowed to top the charts, though. Like, it couldn't be allowed to be number 1 in the singles chart. So as a result, the official BBC chart showed them only at number 2. Behind Rod Stewart's thrusting Song of Rebellion, I don't want to talk about it. Actually, I like that song. It was originally done by Crazy Horse, Neil Young's backing band, but that's a different story. But anyway, so there
The
you can
rest
see
of
what
with Barbara Streisand, it's so funny that they're
what
on
a
there.
wonderful chart. You can see why punk became popular.
Yeah.
You know, I believe that counts as a
Oh
conspiracy.
my God.
That's right. Sandwiched between Rod Stewart and Kenny Rogers. And with Barbara Streisand bringing up the rear, so to speak. I'm quite keen on the Jacksons. That one's okay. And the Shuffle, Van McCoy. I was a big fan of 10cc there at number 9. But you can see what they were dealing with. So the chart was manipulated. Everyone's convinced it was manipulated. First of all, for 1 week only, the BBC said, we're not counting record sales from record companies that own their own stores, aka Virgin Megastores, who sold tons of records, not just their own, for 1 week only. So they didn't count the Virgin sales, which was like half of the record stores in the country. This is the kind of shit they pulled. When they did Top of the Pops, they just skipped over it. And number 2, we're not going to talk about that. And you know, some charts even blanked the name completely.
That's the beautiful thing, because then, I mean, and we're still talking about it 45 years later. Basically, we caught them trying to suppress the, well, in this case, the Sex Pistols. Once you catch that all the way up to the top of the government, once you catch them doing suppression, I was still fresh out of Poland at that point. I was like, oh, here we fucking go again. So it's and now look where we are. See, that's right there. That's the seeds of today's world. The kids are rebelling, and the government they're treading on the kids. We are the flowers in your dustbin, ma'am.
Yeah, well said, Captain. Well said. That's what it was all
And
about.
it's the Streisand effect.
Absolutely. Literally the Streisand effect.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, trying to suppress it only made it more popular.
So if Barbara hadn't been in that chart...
So bad.
Tell everyone, the government lied about the Sex Pistols. Sorry, Rod Stewart. That ain't happening. Not on my watch.
I'd just like to say a hail to Polly, Latino Slant. Thanks for coming in to watch, man. Hey, you can join the show if you want. Let me know. We can send
Orale.
So anyway, Virgin themselves stated at the time that they were convinced the song had made number 1, and they had the sales receipts to prove it because of the sales they'd made. And they were sold out. You couldn't buy a copy of the record, and they know how many they'd made. And years later, the BBC did tacitly admit that they had rigged the chart to preserve the Queen's dignity, you see. But for one glorious week, the entire British establishment shit themselves over a little 7-inch piece of plastic. And it was fucking glorious. And to this day, it's still a glorious slab of noise. The Pistols, I love the Pistols songs because unlike a lot of punk stuff, it was fairly thin in production-wise. This one was a meaty slab of power, you know. Chris Thomas produced it, so he had a great record. He started with the Beatles and White Album and stuff like that. So
you don't think Big Tech would ever pull anything like that in the modern day, do you?
Never. They would never hide something they didn't like and shadow ban it and download it and cheat. Who cheats on polls? I mean, come on, nobody cheats on polls. I trust the polls. Well, not that I don't mean the Polish people. I'm not talking about the Polish people, of course, Captain. Anyway, to move on to my number 3 Sex Pistols memory moment, whatever you want to call it. After my zooming in on that chart, which took me ages to figure out. This one was Lemmy giving Sid Vicious bass lessons. So, Sid Vicious...
Amazing.
Well, after Glenn Matlock, the bass player, was fired from the Sex Pistols, supposedly for liking the Beatles. Well, he actually did like the Beatles, but that wasn't why he was fired, but they used that in the press. And Glenn's a very capable player. I mean, went on to be in the Rich Kids with Midge Ure, great Scottish artist. But the band then turned to their old chum who hung out in the club, Sid Vicious, to replace him, despite Sid having something like less than 0 capability on any instrument. But he'd made the attempt, he was making the attempt to learn, and he learnt from none other than the legendary Lemmy of Motorhead, because Sid lived in Lemmy's flat for a while in London. So, to quote Lemmy, and I can't do his voice properly, Johnny Rotten used to go and see Hawkwind play when Lemmy was in Hawkwind. I remember him turning up in his long hair and a greatcoat at London gigs. Sid Vicious lived in my flat for a couple of months, and I tried to teach him bass, but he was hopeless. And one day he came rushing into the flat all excited saying, "Lemmy, I got the job with the Sex Pistols." And I said, "Great, are you part of the road crew?" And I laughed when he told me he was playing bass. "You can't even play the bass. You're fucking hopeless." So even Lemmy couldn't teach him. But what I want to know is, what kind of neighbours did they have in this flat? And what did they think of
Deaf
what was
ones.
going on? That's right.
They weren't deaf at the start, they were deaf at the end.
That's right. Imagine living next to Lemmy and Sid Vicious. I mean, I hate to think of the state of that flat inside. I mean, doesn't bear thinking about for those of a hygienic persuasion. I'm surprised they
Just
could get the
imagine
door
some
open.
little old lady.
They'd probably be comparing swastika collection.
I mean, imagine it. It's carving swastikas into each other. It's like 400 bottles of whiskey and beer cans lying around. And I don't know. I hate to think of it. Imagine if they said, we're having a party, and after the end of the party, they said, "Do you want to sleep here for the night?" "No, I think I'll just walk 20 miles home. It's okay." Anyway, so that was Sid's vain attempt to learn how to play an instrument. At number 2, the Sex Pistols go sailing. And this is a really good one. So anyway, on June the 7th, 1977, Malcolm McLaren, who was a great promoter, and I actually like some of the records he made after that, Buffalo Girls, stuff like that. He was quite a good record producer.
Buffalo girls go around the outside, round the outside.
That's the one. So June 7th, 1977, Malcolm McLaren lined up a boat trip, promotional event to mark the launch of God Save the Queen. And it was a cruise down the River Thames through central London on a boat named the Queen Elizabeth. See what he did there? So the Pistols and a bunch of their pals, who included people like Jordan, who was on the scene, Ja Wobble, Public Image Limited, later Palmolive, Vivian Westwood's, Richard Branson was on it. Yeah, they were all on this boat. Set sail about 6:30 p.m. As it was getting dark, they started playing a set. And you see them playing, out in the top of the boat as they're going through. And the booze was really flowing, amongst other things, probably. The live set, just as they passed the Houses of Parliament, they played Anarchy in the UK.
Oh.
Now, how fucking good is that? I mean, come on. But then things started to go a little wrong. A little awry, shall we say. And the trip ended in chaos. So lots of people were complaining. The authorities were not pleased about this. So the police launches forced the boat to dock. And McLaren, Westwood and others were arrested. Although the band themselves
you've been trapped.
managed to escape. This is on the boat.
As soon as you like, the license to this premises wants you off, so please leave now before there's any further trouble.
The reason you're here is because it's the Sex Pistols. If it wasn't the Sex Pistols, there'd be no interest in this boat tonight.
There's Vivian Westwood, Malcolm McLaren getting dragged away. Vivian Westwood was arrested as well. So the band didn't get arrested. I'm not sure why, but the police intervened just to save face for the establishment. However, if Malcolm McLaren's aim was to get maximum publicity, once again he succeeded, because this was front page news, and I think it was hilarious. Plain anarchy. But anyway, at number 1, we've mentioned it earlier, the Pistols' infamous Bill Grundy show appearance.
Yes.
Which possibly more than anything else made national headlines in history. sharper-eyed people here may spot a certain Susie Banshee, Susie Sue, standing up in the corner. But so December 1st, 1976, it's got to be one of the biggest miscalculations in television history. The Pistols and their entourage were invited onto this show, which was on London. I didn't see it because it was in London, Thames Television. But, you know, millions of people did. Hosted by a guy called Bill Grundy. Ironically, they were booked to replace Queen, who had dropped out. So the Pistols were booked at the last minute. They were still on EMI at this point, and so were Queen. And whoever did this probably paid with their life, never mind their job, but they booked the Pistols. So both the band and Grundy appear to be a little bit well-oiled. And it wasn't long before things went badly wrong, as we shall see.
Your granddad. Are you worried or are you just enjoying yourself?
Enjoying myself.
Are you?
Yeah.
So that's what you were doing.
Always wanted to meet you.
Did you really?
Yeah.
We'll meet afterwards, shall we?
You
dirty son. You dirty old man.
Oh, keep going, Chief. Keep going. Go on, you've got another 5 seconds. Say something outrageous.
You dirty bastard.
Go on, again.
You dirty fucker.
What a clever boy.
What a fucking rotter.
Well, that's it.
And the headlines the next day. The Filth and the Fury. Which, of course, became the name of a movie. But I mean, again, there's no such thing as bad publicity. That applied to the Pistols. There's no bad publicity for them because they became famous overnight because of this. But the same...
that graphic, too.
Yeah, the same didn't apply to Grundy because he lost his job and his career was over after that night. So, bad publicity
It's a
can be
bit of
good
a
for some.
tightrope, I must say. You walk it at your peril, but it can pay off handsomely.
Indeed. Well, they didn't care, but Grundy did. Grundy was out after that. So that was my amazing top
Dirty
5
rotter.
Pistols moments, and I hope you all enjoyed those.